Hey, folks, welcome back. For those of you that are coming back again, thank you again for being here. Yes, you get a two for today. Two videos, both of which I hope to keep somewhat short, 30 minutes or less, and about very important topics related to gun owners. And this particular topic relates to gun owners all over the place. Now, we're going to talk about forced reset triggers. What is a forced? You came twice. What is a forced reset trigger? First of all, a forced reset trigger is a device that you can put into a firearm. Let me back up a little bit. As you know, in a semi-automatic handgun, you depress the trigger, one bullet goes if your firearm is working. And that's it. If you hold that trigger down, just one trigger pull, one shot. An automatic weapon is where you hold the trigger down and it continues to shoot bullets until you let go of your finger. That's an automatic weapon. Now, that's actually a legal distinction in the law. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. What the federal law actually says. It's just a very small section that we're going to focus on, mainly because that's what the ATF is talking about. But the ATF sent out this letter. Let me share this here with you because we're going to be talking about this. And this is just the start of all the problems. Now, you'll notice, I don't know why this is just now coming out, or maybe it's just now getting big because of what happened with the pistol brace thing. But this is a letter that was sent out March 22nd of last year, and it's an open letter to all federal firearms licensees. That's important for several very important reasons that I'm going to discuss today. But before I do that, let me first state that while I'm an attorney, I am not your attorney, okay? I am not giving you legal advice. I'm giving you information about how this letter applies, okay? If you are concerned after this video about what to do legally, you need to consult an attorney who may or may not agree with me, okay? He or she may or may not agree with what I'm about to tell you. But I'm pretty confident in my analysis of what this is. So, first and foremost, there is no formal or official rule or law that regulates FRTs. I told you what a semi-automatic is. I told you what an automatic is. What the ATF is trying to say here is that a forced reset trigger makes, and this is what people are concerned about, is that a forced reset trigger makes it an automatic weapon subject to the Unconstitutional Firearms Act, the NFA, that hopefully one day we can get banned. So let's go through this letter here. The BATF has recently examined devices commonly known as forced reset triggers and has determined that some of them are firearms and machine guns as defined by the NFA and machine guns as defined under the GCA. These particular forced reset triggers are being marketed as replacement triggers for AR-type firearms. Unlike traditional triggers and binary triggers, sometimes referred to generally as FRTs, the subject FRTs, and I'm going to explain what this is, do not require shooters to pull and then subsequently release the trigger to fire a second shot. Stop. This was obviously written by somebody who has never fired a gun in their life. And yet they're out here regulating the firearms industry through their incompetence. First of all, in semi-automatic weapons, the shooter doesn't release the trigger. I don't know of any training on firearms that's ever been given that says after you pull that trigger, let go of it, let go of it, let go of it. You find out, because every trigger has some play in it, has a little bit of play. And if you want a maximum rate of fire through practice, you learn where that play is, and you keep your finger on the trigger so that you don't let go of it any more than you have to. You don't release that pressure any more than you have to. There's a constant stream of pressure on your handgun, whether it's a double action, single action, it doesn't matter. A good shooter doesn't just shoot and take your finger off unless you're done. Unless you shoot one shot and you've hit your target and you don't need to, then yes, you release your finger. But any good shooter keeps his finger on there. So this idea that you release the trigger prior to the second shot being fired is already proof of ignorance of what the ATF is talking about here. And I'm going to explain a little bit more in detail why technically a lot of what this letter says is completely just false. By contrast, some aftermarket triggers have similar components, but also incorporate a disconnector or similar feature to ensure that the trigger must be released before the second shot may be fired and may not be machine guns. So here's what's interesting. There are people out there going around saying that, oh my gosh, my forced reset trigger is illegal, and because it's illegal, I've got to get rid of it. That's not what even this letter says, and I've highlighted exactly what this letter says. Some, only some of them, the subject FRTs, which means only the ones that they are targeting, not all of them, and some aftermarket triggers have similar components. So you don't know. Now, you would think after reading just 2 paragraphs into the ATF's letter, okay, maybe they're going to explain how some of these FRTs are going to be considered machine guns. What makes some and not others? Why not all of them being firearms and machine guns? So it talks about this is what machine gun is defined as under the NFA, which this is the first law, and the GCA, the Gun Control Act, which is the second law here. And this is what a machine gun is. Any weapon which shoots, is designed to shoot, or can readily be restored to shoot automatically, more than one shot. Now keep in mind, well, let me read this whole thing. More than one shot without manual recording by a single function of the trigger. The term shall also include the frame or receiver of any such weapon, any part designed or intended slowly or exclusively, and this is what they're highlighting right here, or combination of parts, and they're calling the forced reset trigger this combination of parts designed and intended for use in converting a weapon into a machine gun. And then, now, what's a machine gun? It's something that shoots automatically more than one shot, right? Notice nowhere in this definition, and nowhere, if you go and read these 2 sections, right here and right here, nowhere in there will you see anything about a machine gun being a part or combination of parts that increases the rate of fire. Rate of fire is nowhere in the definition of a machine gun. Nowhere in there. What's in there is if a part makes a gun an automatic gun. In other words, you pull the trigger and it shoots more than one shot, okay, with a single pull of the trigger, a single function of the trigger. So the ATS examination found that some FRT devices, not all of them, allow a firearm to automatically expel more than one shot with a single continuous pull of the trigger. For this reason, ATF has concluded that FRTs, and here's where it gets interesting, that function in this way. So this only FRTs, the force reset triggers, that function in this way. In other words, firing more than one shot with a single continuous pull of a trigger, making it an automatic firing weapon, calling it a machine gun, are a combination of parts designed and intended for use in converting a weapon into a machine gun. And hence, ATF has classified these devices. Now, hopefully in this letter, they're going to tell us what these devices are, right? As a machine gun as defined by the NFA. All right. Accordingly, ATF's position is that any FRT that allows a firearm to automatically expel more than one shot with a continuous pull of the trigger is a machine gun. It didn't say all. It just said Only those FRTs that allow more than one shot with a single continuous pull of the trigger, and it's accordingly subject. So the language here is very vague, as you can see. Now, what it says here, accordingly, blah, 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 continuous pull and is accordingly subject to GCA prohibitions regarding the possession, transport, transfer of machine guns. They are also subject to registration, transfer, taxation, and possession restrictions. Any person that violates it, we're going to throw you in jail. We're going to take a lot of your money. We're going to steal it. We're going to violate your freedom. Based on the ATF's determination that FRTs that function as described above, again, not all FRTs. So if you've got an FRT, nothing to worry about. As long as it doesn't function as above, it doesn't create a fully automatic weapon. Our machine guns, ATF intends to take appropriate remedial action with respect to sellers and possessors of these devices. Current possessors of these devices are encouraged to contact the ATF for further guidance on how they may divest possession. Do not do this. Do not ever go to the federal government and tell them, hey, I'm a felon. Hey, I'm breaking the law. I know you told me to, or I'm not uncertain, but I'm going to let you know, because here's what's going to happen, especially under the current communist regime that we have installed in the White House. As soon as you tell the ATF, hey, I've got this forced reset trigger, boom, you're a felon. You've got an unregistered machine gun before they even look at it. Next thing you know, you're in trouble. Whereas if look, this is the end of the letter. You notice nowhere in this letter do they tell you, well, what are these some FRT devices? Which ones are the subject FRTs? Which ones did you review specifically? They don't say any of that. But if you have one that functions in the way that's described above, that allows the firearm to expel more than one round with a single continuous pull of the trigger, that's the one that is there. So the language in this letter is very vague, and vague language is considered constitutionally unenforceable for two reasons. And the Supreme Court in City of Chicago versus Morales, and you know what? 527 U.S. 41. That's the citation. It's a 1999 case, City of Chicago versus Morales. The Supreme Court gave two reasons why vague language like this. Oh, well, some of these are, some of these aren't, right? Same thing with the pistol brace. First, rules like this fail to provide the kind of notice that will enable ordinary people to understand what conduct it is prohibiting. And second is it may authorize and even encourage arbitrary and discriminatory enforcement by groups and agencies like the ATF. So while the definition of machine gun under those two chapters includes that phrase, a combination of parts designed or intended for use in converting a weapon into a machine gun, if these parts allow a weapon to shoot automatically more than one shot without manual reloading by a single function trigger, then federal law considers that a machine gun. A single function of the trigger. However, as you likely know, except for the, maybe some of the retards like Sean Hawkins who are in there, if you know anything about guns, this is not how a forced reset trigger works. A forced reset trigger actually moves your finger forward on the trigger so that the trigger itself can reset. The trigger has to reset. In an automatic weapon, there is no reset. It just keeps firing until the pin just keeps firing. There's nothing else to reset. Whereas a forced reset trigger forces your finger forward, right? That's what the mechanism does. It forces your finger forward. Instead of you, after each shot on your own doing it, it's forcing your finger to do this. This is what you're doing in semi-automatic. This is what you are doing with a forced reset trigger. It's just the only difference is my muscle versus the gun itself doing this to my finger. So it actually moves that forward. So, and this requires several functions. When you pull the trigger, that's a single function. The FRT then forces your finger forward. That's a second function. So it is not a single function of the trigger to have an FRT. The only difference between an FRT and a regular trigger is who is pushing the finger forward or what is pushing the finger forward. In a truly automatic weapon, the finger is never forced forward to re-engage the firing pin and allow another round to be fired. Now, much like the recent pistol brace rule, the ATF opines that, quote, not all these FRTs are illegal, as I've said. So the problem is that the ATF is confusing objects that allow for an increased rate of fire with objects that create automatic fire. Federal law, as I said earlier, does not forbid faster rates of fire. It forbids automatic fire. And automatic fire is a single depression of the trigger, multiple rounds coming out, more than one round. So if you contact the ATF and you explain that you're in possession of what they consider to be a machine gun, and your FRT is in fact one that they have considered, you can be charged with a felony and your admission will be used against you in court. Look, he came and reported himself as being this criminal, so you've got to convict him. He even admitted it. You notice they never say anything you say can and will be used for your benefit. No, it's always going to be used against you. So, it's my belief that this letter holds no constitutionally legal weight because it misrepresents, one, what an FRT is, and it's unconstitutionally vague. It violates due process by failing to give the public notice. This isn't a letter to the public. This is a letter to FFLs. FFLs have no duty, no matter what the ATF tells them to do. FFLs have no duty to inform you of anything. They're not required to tell you that an object that you bought legally is now being considered illegal by the ATF. They have no requirement to do that. And so, additionally, there's no law or published rule that makes these FRTs illegal. All we have is this, quote, open letter. The only indication is this open letter. And this open letter is not even to the general public. The ATF has not published a rule on the Federal Register informing the public about FRTs, and it hasn't sent out owners of FRTs letters saying, hey, you might have something illegal. So therefore, the public has not been given constructive notice that even if the FRTs are illegal, which ones are? Now, in Giacchio versus Pennsylvania, this is a 1966 case, 382 U.S. 399, the Supreme Court said it is well established that a law fails to meet the requirements of due process clause if it is so vague and standardless that it leaves the public uncertain as to the conduct it prohibits. And we don't know which of these force reset triggers they tested, and there are many out there, are the ones that they tested and considered that they are machine guns. So what should you do? I've got three options for you. And what it all boils down to is an independent cost benefit analysis for each individual person. The first thing you can do, keep the FRT, do nothing, because you may not even have an illegal FRT. I firmly believe the rule is unconstitutional and unenforceable. Do not publish or publicize that you have one. Just exist and keep being a law-abiding American. But if you keep it, I recommend you either remove it or not, but don't publish it. If you remove it from your gun, and even if you don't remove it from your gun, there's the chance that the ATF or law enforcement agency may visit you. If the ATF or law enforcement agency arrives at your door, do not answer any questions. Shut up. I'm sorry, I don't answer questions. Have a good day. Do you have a warrant? No, have a good day. Do not answer any questions about you, whether you own one, whether you once owned one, whether you purchased one, whether you possess one, whether you once possessed one, or even whether you've ever used an FRT. For all you know, you have no idea what they're talking about because you're not going to answer questions. Do not answer any questions. If ATF or law enforcement agency does not have a warrant, explain you're not willing to answer those questions, you do not consent to a search, and ask them to leave your property. Immediately contact an attorney. You have this right. You have this right to tell them to leave if they don't have a warrant, and you have this right to contact an attorney because if they think that you still have one, don't answer questions like, oh, well, I used to have one, but I sold it. Okay, just don't say anything. Even if they come to your house and say, we have reason to believe that you had an FRT, and you never in your life ever owned an FRT, don't even say that you've never owned one. I don't know what you're talking about. Just say, I do not answer questions, and contact your attorney. The second thing you can do is destroy or dispose of the FRT. Now, if you do that, that's, you can take it out of the gun, get rid of it, sell it. I don't know, whatever you want to do to it. You're not supposed to, if it's an illegal one, transfer it. But again, you don't know that it's illegal. For all you know, it's not. But document its destruction. If you destroy it, document that you destroyed it through either a sworn affidavit and or audio and visual photography or video evidence that you destroyed it. Because if you ever do go to trial and they're like, hey, you have this thing, and you're like, well, no, I saw that letter and I thought mine might be affected by it, and so I destroyed it. Here's the video of me destroying it. Don't tell them what kind it was, because it may or may not have met the definition of this letter. Okay, so the first thing you can do is keep it, do nothing, and take that risk. But you risk, of course, being raided. That's a risk. If you think they're going to come after you and you do nothing, there's that risk that they come after you. But just remember to do those things that I said before. Make sure you have an attorney ready to fight this, because even if they do come after you, you have legal rights and will likely possibly win in court. Okay. The second one is you can destroy it. The third one is you can do what the ATF says. Contact them and say, hey guys, I'm a felon. What do you want me to do with this thing? Right. So you can surrender your FRT to the ATF if they determine that your FRT is a machine gun. Now, you should only surrender if that's the course you want to take, because that's the path of least resistance, probably. Personally, I think, if you really just don't want to deal with it, you just want to destroy it. The Constitution requires that, under the takings clause, that they reimburse you if they're going to steal your property or force you to destroy your property. So I don't know why anybody would destroy it without being compensated. But if you surrender it, you should only surrender to them under protest. Make clear that you do not consent to the forfeiture or the destruction of your property. Now, here's what's really important. If you decide to surrender your forced reset trigger to the ATF, you need to require a property receipt. And there are two forms. The form they're going to make you try to sign is what's called an ATF form 3400.1. ATF form 3400.1. Do not sign the 3400.1. Don't. That is the consent to forfeiture and destruction of property and waiver of notice. That means it doesn't matter that I didn't have notice. You're telling the courts I'm allowing, or you're telling the ATF, not only am I allowing you to destroy my private property, but I'm also waiving the fact that you're required to give me notice that I have illegal property. And you want them to have to force you to give you notice. And this letter does not give notice. Let me fix my camera here. This letter does not give notice. So the form that you want to, and write this down if you've got a forced reset trigger, the 3400.23, the ATF form 3400.23. This is a receipt of property and other items form. This is a form saying that you gave property to the ATF, but you're not giving them permission to destroy it. You're not giving them permission to get rid of it. They are going to try to get you to sign the 3400.1. That's the consent to forfeiture and destruction of property, and it's also your waiver of notice. Do not sign this, no matter how much they try to convince you otherwise. Demand the 3400.23. If you're not agreeing to have the FRT destroyed or forfeited, make sure you don't sign that .1. Sign the .23. It also protects your right to be reimbursed for the value of the FRT if it's destroyed without your permission. You can file to have that, because the government is required to compensate you when it takes your property. Make sure that you record the surrender. You have photos of your property prior to handing it over. That's important, so that if and when it's returned, you've already documented its condition, and you make sure that you get it back exactly as it was given to you. And that's important, because if they don't give it back to you in the way that you gave it to them, again, they've now converted your property into something less valuable. They owe you money. So additionally, there's a letter here that I've written up. Those of you who are members of Self-Defense Fund will get this in written form, what I'm talking about today. but also write them a letter, and don't forget to contact an attorney. Okay, because if in any way the ATF thinks you have an FRT and they come after you, you're going to need an attorney. As I informed you, dear agent so-and-so, whoever the agent is that's coming over, as I informed you on this date, when you took my blank, whatever items it was, I surrendered them under protest, as I understand that the ATF wrongly believes that my continued possession of those items would result in my arrest and prosecution. As I dispute ATF's conclusion and authority in this matter, I am only surrendering my items to preclude my arrest and prosecution. I do not consent to the destruction of my items, nor do I consent to the forfeiture of my items. I assert all of my rights pursuant to the United States Constitution and all applicable federal laws. In the event ATF's newly amended interpretation is enjoined or deemed unlawful by a court of law, I expect ATF to immediately return my items at no cost to me, and expect that ATF will not cause any damage or harm to them while in its possession. I have documented the condition of my items so that they are returned in the same condition in which they were taken against my will. Thank you for your time and assistance in this matter. Yours truly, insert your name. All right. There you go. That is how the forced reset triggers work. Never talk to the ATF. Never, ever, 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 ever. All right. Look at that. I got it under 27 minutes. Now, here's the deal. There's a good question here by Herbal Patriot 2 ATX. Is this something that they tracked or recorded? No. But here's what they're doing. Right now, there is a case going through where the ATF is demanding that these manufacturers turn over records of who purchased these items. The manufacturers are, of course, opposing the ATF's demands to turn over the purchaser list. But should these companies lose, that's when they're going to know who's purchased them. So are they being tracked or recorded? Not yet. But if they lose that court case and these companies that make these FRTs are required to turn over their, their sales logs and who purchased them, then they're going to know who to go after. But again, just because you purchase something doesn't mean you still have it. Okay. They have to prove that you still have something that you purchased. There are a lot of guns that I've purchased that I no longer have, or I've gifted, or I've sold, or I've traded for. So just because I purchased the gun, legal or illegal, just because I purchased a part, legal or illegal, doesn't mean that I still have it. And any warrant is going to have to convince a judge, unless it's rubber stamped, that you still possess an illegal, something that they are claiming is illegal. So if there's no warrant, they don't get into your house. If there's no warrant, you don't answer questions. If there is a warrant, you don't answer questions, okay? Just let them go in accordance with the warrant, but make sure they show it to you. Make sure you see it. That's it, guys. That's on the FRTs. This is no different than the pistol brace. As a matter of fact, this is older than the pistol brace issue. This is about forced reset triggers, and it was issued back in March of 2022, so over almost a year and a half ago. And but for some reason, it's just now coming to at least my attention and others' attention on a regular basis, probably because there are these videos out there of people with the ATF showing up at their home. Now, let me tell you something. The reason these ATF agents don't say, well, you know what, I don't care. We're coming in and we're looking at your, we're going to get a warrant, is because this is just a letter. It's not a rule. It's not a law. It's not a regulation. They haven't done anything to make a forced reset trigger legally fall under, and I say legally very loosely, legally fall under the definition of a machine gun. All right, guys, you guys take care, be safe, be free. I almost made it under 30 minutes. It's 30 minutes and 10 seconds. Take care. I'll talk to you next time.